adults are terrified of losing control over children because it means that give them up their power. I have often seen professionals with many years of experience literally tremble with fear when a group of children talk about their work or start to share ideas.
Bonjour and welcome to Wide Walls, a podcast where educators, researchers, designers, and innovators share their vision for building richer learning experiences for children and reflect on the journeys that shape them. I'm Mathieu Penaud, a product manager and learning experience designer exploring the intersection of design, technology, and education and the human stories behind it. If today's conversation resonates with you, share it with someone who cares about the future of learning. And now, let's welcome our guest. Today on Wide Walls, I'm excited to welcome José Antonio Gordill Martorell. José is a design strategist and education innovator, founder and CEO of Cultural Inquiry, and author of the recent Routledge book, Children's Boards in Museums. He has spent years working alongside researchers, museums, and global design communities to rethink how children engage with learning environments. In this episode, we explore co-design with children, what changes when children become partners in the design process, and why today's large language models are not yet built with young learners in mind. We discuss what it takes to build AI systems that truly respect children's developmental, emotional, and creative needs. José, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Wide Worlds.
Thank you, Mate. Very happy to be with you.
Before we start, I have a few rapid-fire questions to ask you. So the goal is for you to say the first thing that comes to mind, and we'll be happy to elaborate. So the first question is, where did you grow up?
Well, I grew up in my hometown, Barcelona, in a wonderful city. So this is my origin, my big fan.
Nice. And where do you live now?
I'm living in Zurich, in Switzerland.
And who was your favorite teacher growing up?
My favorite teacher was a wonderful teacher in my Montessori school. Was a wonderful woman, and she was the first one who saw on me all the potential and support me to touch the moon.
What grade was it?
At 6, 7 years old, when I was 6, 7, yeah, was a very important presence of a teacher in my life. I mean, she represented what is should be a good teacher. Is the one who see on you all the potential. Gabriel Garcia Marquez said your favorite toy and your passion, and put everything to support on you this passion and to make possible that you reach this passion all your life.
That's awesome. And talking about school, what is one thing that all kids should learn at school?
I will put the question on reverse. They should teach their teachers to play.
Nice. That's a good one. Actually, it's funny because the next question is, what is one thing that all adults should learn at work?
Play. To play.
That's what I thought.
It's the most important thing in life. It's the most serious thing. Yeah.
Right. And I'm sure we're going to talk more about play in our conversation. Yeah. You mentioned when you talked about your teacher, like she knew about your favorite toy, etc. I'm curious about what was your favorite toy or game as a child?
My imagination. I mean, I remember that the best moments were in a ladder in the bill I live with my family, and was an empty space, but we transformed this empty space and the ladder that communicate different uh, rooms and different levels of the flat in a kind of magic space, imagining everything. And we didn't need anything, just our imagination. We transformed this space in everything, in a spacecraft, in a supermarket, in a big palace, in a big uh, competition, tennis
Mhm.
match, everything. And that's a demonstration that the most important toy is your imagination, always.
Yeah,
Not only when you are a child, always.
true. Yeah, that's very true. And today, so we're going to talk a lot about AI in our conversation. What is your favorite AI tool or application of AI in your everyday life?
Uh, I'm discovering now these AI tools like Paddle and Animated and this kind of programs that are focused on creativity and let's say respect a little bit your previous path on creativity. So you don't need them to create. It's exactly this question of the lava I mentioned you is
Mhm.
I find interesting an artificial intelligence program when I don't need it.
Oh,
It's a kind of different approach. I mean,
yeah.
as much free I feel to use it or not, as much interesting
Mm.
for me is the program.
Mm. Yeah, that's a very interesting point. Thank you. Right. Thank you for answering these rapid fire questions.
My pleasure.
And now I'm ready to get into the main part of the conversation. How do you feel when you reflect on your journey from where you started to where you are now?
This is a very interesting question, the concept of journey. And it's funny because since my childhood, I have been developed, my feeling is that I have trying to develop the same story in a thousand of different ways with different people, with in different contexts, different places, different cultures. But the essence is exactly the same, is to make others listen, respect, and take seriously my own voice as a child when I was a child, but also afterwards other children voices.
Mhm.
As the great poet Louis Glick said, we look at the world once in childhood, the rest is memory. And I think it's so true. I mean, these first 5 6 years are the ground, the fundamentals of everything. I share with you this picture, nice picture of my
Mhm.
childhood when I was 3 years old and I'm on the beach and celebrating my birthday with my grandma and my grandfather. It's very sunny and warm, and I'm very confident and comfortable and safe celebrating the joy to be alive. And this picture have gave me a lot of energy, a lot of confidence in sometimes hard times, and is I think the best representation of who is Jose and was his attitude toward the world and how wonderful is to be connected with the wine, with the sun, with the water, with the family, and this photo sums up everything that is to come. It's a kind of big bang moment.
Mm.
I constantly return to reconnect and reinforce my own inner child. That is for me something very important because I work constantly with children. I need to be a kind of alter ego to be well and honest and truly connected with the children that I used to work with in museums and schools and everything. So is a very interesting moment of this journey, this beach day.
Very interesting. Is that something that inspires you to like you want to recreate this kind of
Exactly,
feelings or moments for other children around the
exactly.
world
These
as well?
memories is a constant recreation to try to feel like that, but also to try to invite others to feel in the same way.
Yeah, because a big idea that you've been championing in your career, in your work, is really the idea of designing with
Hmm.
children
Hmm.
rather than designing for children. And I'm curious what you see changes when children move from being just like users to becoming co-designers.
I must say that I prefer the term co-creation, and
Mm-hmm.
because is more aligned with participation from children better than for children.
Mm-hmm.
Just some days ago, I started a project with a museum, and we were have a very interesting discussion about museums that work with children and museums that work from children. And this with and from are very important because represent two very different philosophies and approach.
Mm.
And I think that what is so incredible is I'm amazed by their uniqueness, their universe, who is certainly not very familiar for adults because we as an adults find it very convenient to pigeonhole children and label them and classify them immediately with quite unfortunate adjectives like crazy, like lazy, like superficial, like immature. We have
Mm-hmm.
a lot to immediately use these labels, and we need adults, we need constantly control and protect. And we see this constantly also in the more recent debates about banning social media and artificial intelligence. Again, we consider children as the constant, permanent, immature human beings without capacity to defend themselves and think correctly themselves and criticize themselves and have critical thinking. And they have a lot, so many times much more than adults we have. So the whole series of cliches that we have created for them to keep them away from the serious, dangerous things of grown ups are affecting quite seriously all our relationships, and not
Mm-hmm.
only between adults and children, also between adults themselves. When you can question these mental models that are deeply rooted in our culture, a completely different reality emerge where children are incredibly inspiring, sophisticated, enormously gifted in understanding processes and that adults even cannot even understand.
Mm-hmm.
I remember an incredible conversation with a girl, 10 years old. She looked at me very, very straight and told me, "You adults are a mess because you don't know how to solve the problems that you create, and you don't allow us to solve. We know how to do it, but you don't allow." And it's so true. They are an amazing agents of change, facilitators, connectors, healers,
Mm-hmm.
storytellers, researchers. But the key is always the same: is step back, be able to question your mental models as an adult, reconnect with your inner child, and trust them and listen carefully to what they are telling us. That is so interesting and important.
Right. Yeah. No, that's definitely they definitely have a different point of view that we have lost over time and needs respect. And I'm curious what it looks like concretely when you're involve children in the co-creation of a project. So I'm wonder if you have some examples you can share of what it concretely looks like.
I always I'm constantly surprised by their radical honesty and
Mhm.
transparency and vulnerability. So they have a special ability to read the reality from this place of vulnerability. They show so bravely and courageously their emotions. That is something that we adults unfortunately tend to lose and to to hide along the way. So I always tell the story of the amazing Susan. In one of our children's council, we were visiting a museum in the north of Sweden, and the visit was about the positions of everyone was occupying on the museum. Some of them were curators, some others educators, some others on the cafe, others on the management, whatever, and explaining the group of children who they what and what were the main tasks. When we finish the visit, we have a meeting with all the staff and the director, and Susan calmly hung up her hand and asked in the middle of the group, why the people who is working here is so sad. Silence in the room. It was absolutely a shocking question. Nobody there to answer. And the second question was from Susan again, how much time do you play together? And the answer from the director was, well, Susan, we don't play because we are professionals and we have no time to play because play is for you, for children, not for us. And Susan answered, now I understand why the people who is working here is so sad. You don't play.
Hmm.
So what is so fascinating of this story is the radical honesty of Susan and her capacity to dare to articulate this question. By the way, a question that everyone in the place knew, but anyone dare to ask. And this was a kind of revolution, internal revolution, because from this point, so many people start to think about this and they start to play much more every Monday.
Mm.
And the result was spectacular because 1 year after this visit, Susan came back to the museum and she found a completely different thing.
Wow. So her remarks had an impact.
Absolutely. But the key point here is courage
Hmm.
and honesty, radical honesty.
Yeah. And so what makes adults uncomfortable about giving children the space for this honesty and some actual like real authority, right? In participating in the creation
Well,
of the world that they already live in and they will live in longer than us.
adults, we are usually freak control people, not just authority in design, authority in any field, in education, in health, in food, in legal status, in their friendships, in their security, in their future, in their language, they use everything. Here you will differentiate between the classic distinction between power, potestas, a concept in Latin, and authority, that is autoritas. Power is imposed unilaterally and sometimes with some kind of violence, and authority is applied by consensus. So children are quite consensual, but at the same time, they are very affected by power and control
Mhm.
and even violence, unfortunately. So many ways of violence, not only the classical ones or the criminal ones, also the normalized ones in society by language and culture and everything. Adults in general, there are always obviously exceptions. But adults are terrified of losing control over children because it means that give them up their power and literally drives them crazy. I have often seen professionals with many years of experience literally tremble with fear when a group of children talk about their work or start to share ideas or attend something or advise something that they have create or and they are like a kind of I don't know. It's so curious. Culture organizations such as museums, are obviously power structures,
Mm-hmm.
and they have been consolidated over so many years on the assumption that children have no agency or participation in them. They are only passive visitors to make their statistics bigger.
Mm-hmm.
When something like this is in some way facilitated or, uh, let's say, support, friction and disconnections begin to appear. Obviously, I have experienced so many times this in my children's board, but they are also gateways to start thinking differently, and in some cases to create a more democratic museum when children are not mere passive visitors or statistics or numbers or labels, but have real decision making and creative power that they share with the professionals and even
Mm-hmm.
their families, their visitors, their friends, their educators. I know that is not easy because it strikes the very heart of the organization and sometimes can create very uncomfortable situations and even confrontation, resistance, or
Mm-hmm.
frustration. But this can be handled properly. That is my company main goal to make professionals comfortable in this transition process and try to make them discover the joy of the journey because it is a lot
Mm-hmm.
of joy and discoveries.
Yeah, definitely. And it's very interesting how you use these two Spanish words to describe. So it was potencia and
Potencia,
the
potencial,
other
yes.
and other
Potestas,
that
potestas and
potestas.
authorities, and
Yeah,
authorities, yes.
because it's kind of the same thing in French too, where we have two words like puissance, which is kind
Yeah,
of more of that, and power,
exactly.
and yeah, and pouvoir, which is more of
Pouvoir is
yeah,
power.
which
Yeah,
is yeah,
exactly.
and both of them translate with power in English. If
Exactly,
you
exactly.
but they're two different things, right? So it's interesting that we can make that uh, a distinction between the two because yeah, the puissance is more something that's inner
It's
power
exactly.
that you can like
It's consensual.
use.
Is
Yeah,
is something that the people see in you and
mm,
respect on you because you give example and you are
yeah,
allowed to at some moment take a decision. And this
mm,
is a very different process,
yeah, and then the pouvoir is more the
more
authority.
imposing.
Yeah,
And unfortunately, some or culture organizations are very power rooted. So it's a very hierarchical, it's a kind of pyramid, is very vertical. And when you start a process of change by involving children on this process, there's a lot of friction because it's not only a question of a new way to do things, it's a question of power sharing.
no, I love that. That's very interesting. And I'm curious, like from an education, like a learning standpoint, like what happens to children's motivation, confidence, sense of ownership? Like how do they evolve when they are included, when they are welcome as co-creators?
This is so interesting. The first thing that strikes you, and this is, by the way, very sad, is that they don't quite believe that you take them seriously. So I have participated in so many projects where you first have to convince them that it's true that you're really interested in knowing what they think, what they believe, what they can do and you take it seriously. So this shows the enormous distance that exists between adults and children who have chosen finally to remain in their world. So the adults will leave them alone and create what I call the railway track realities. I mean, realities that run in parallel but never intersect because of mechanism designed by adults to ensure that this is the case and they are constantly seeing each other from distance, a
Mm,
kind of security distance. So in
hmm
addition, there is a lot of also children where I called children washing, children tokenism, with irony. Adults who pretend to be cool and fun and with children, but who are nothing more than transactional agents to get what they want from them. Sometimes it's an image for a marketing campaign in your organization to raise funds, or a set of photographs to put in your annual reports and say how cool is your organization and how sensible is for children and so on. The real proof that we are in a serious process about working with children is that you are willing to bear the cost of a relationship based on authenticity and vulnerability. And this involves internal change and new beginnings in
Mhm.
the organization. So it involves resistance, friction, for sure, conflict, readjustments, debates, controversies. It is not easy at all.
Mhm.
But if this happen, is something extraordinary. That's something that I try to facilitate to my clients I work with, and it's incredibly important. Many museums have started running programs for children without considering these mental models, but they don't get very far.
And talking about like the education system itself, if children were more systematically included, in shaping their learning environments, what would the education system look like potentially in the long term, like over a generation? How could that shift the way we approach education?
Yeah, this is funny. I'll sum it up in one sentence. Schools will be places that children will want to return to constantly,
Mm.
or if you prefer, never go home. The same for museums and the same for so many institutions. You can scale and apply. They will have to be forced to leave because
Mm.
they will love to stay. Because what they find in this space with these people means everything to them. It's curious. This Christmas, I set a teacher's challenge on LinkedIn with one of my sweet provocations. I'm famous of my sweet provocations. So I ask who dares to say this to their students before go to Christmas holiday. Dear children, this year, if you don't want to get back to school, you don't have to. And I must say that there was one teacher, I won't say who, but who did it. And curiously, their students came back. So I think it's a place where if these systemic mental models were displaced and questioned and changed, will be a place where they know that everything was designed or co-create
Mm.
to discover their passion, their favorite toy, to pursue it to the fullest without limits. And everything will be conspiring in the good sense for it. A place where
Mhm.
the separation between play and learning disappear. Everything is play because it's the only way to learn. Fail is celebrated. They will not be afraid to fail because fail is the only way to learn.
Mhm.
Where the distinction between those who teach and those who learn disappear because they are in the at the same level teaching key things and key skills to the teachers too, and where the division between the school and outside disappear also cease to exist because everything is a school. It wouldn't matter if you were waiting for the bus or playing hockey or learning to read or using clay to create a sculpture or whatever. Play will be the thread connecting
Mhm.
everything 24/7.
Mhm.
So fortunately, there are some centers operating in this way. I remember One of them, for example, International School of Billund in Denmark, they put the play on the center the, of their strategy. Everything is connected in some way. Curriculum, the capacity building of the teachers, the strategy, the network, the planning, the human resources, the funding, everything. Or, for example, a very interesting program in the States is called multiple choice. This is a kind of program to bring the real life to the school, so students are not studying; they are learning by by implementing real jobs, real professions, and doing supported by real professionals, and it's a kind of very powerful way to reconnect schools with reality and overcome the systemic bias and systemic limitations. Or in other countries, this Green School of Bali, that is also a very interesting initiative, especially how they think about nature and how they consider nature as the school and the classroom. So I'm optimistic about there are so many initiatives emerging, reshaping completely the concept of learning, the concept of a student, the concept of a school, the concept of play by reshaping the whole dynamic. And I must say that in these cases, a pivotal factor is families also. Is the implication and the collaboration, alignment, and complicity of families.
Yeah. No, that's great. I love that. And I want to kind of move the conversation a bit
Mhm.
towards, since we're talking about the future and things that are happening for kids, is one thing that you've been working on a lot recently is AI, and how AI should be more child centered. And you've been like working with researchers and on a lot of very interesting projects. And I think the first question I have on this topic is for you to explain how today's AI tools are like currently misaligned with how children like think, learn, and play.
Hmm. It's a very important question, and it's totally related with our previous inputs
Hmm.
and reflections. Again, technology is designed by for from adults for adults, mainly to make money. And artificial intelligence tools are not an exception; it's exactly the same. And the demonstration of this is that usually they only see children as a customers from whom to expand or to extract time in order to capture data with which this data they can do business and
Hmm.
monetize. So in fact, big tech sees children in general as commodities themselves, not as a human beings. They only want to extract data, and the aim is to turn them into these commodities that contain the most valuable assets for them, that is time, attention. But it's only a kind of way. Is they don't see children as human beings. They see as something that is only a kind of commodity to extract as much as possible. So it's a one-way transactional goal-oriented approach that is then disguised with research and safety reports that no one ever reads and are useless. And so I think the key to all this, and this is the approach with this the hegemonic one, children are used by AI. So as a child recently from Kenya told me some time ago, ChatGPT is as dry as the Sahara Desert. I can joke with it or play pranks on it. And another one told me very interestingly, artificial intelligence is like trying to eat soup with a hammer.
Hmm. Interesting.
So the element of play, the element of fun, if you analyze and observe the majority of the artificial intelligence programs in the market, completely absent in current models. Artificial intelligence is to research, to get information, to develop models, to whatever, but the playful dimension is even unconceivable. iToys are once again serializing and commodifying play. This is not what I'm talking about. But the company responsible, for example, for these artificial intelligent toys, so for that very famous case for was this a company that need to update the code and goes to bankrupt, and the toy was finished, and so many children in the world were so upset and sad because this mess. So the question is whether we are capable of listen to children again and not use children as commodities to offer to the big tech companies. And why are we told that this cannot be done? Why we are constantly thinking about artificial intelligence in very specific ways? Who is building this mental model in ourselves? What I see is that more and more initiatives are emerging to democratize this mental model and to shape this mental model, demonstrating that it's possible to think in different terms and reshape the whole thing, the whole tool, the whole model from the scratch, starting by deep listening different voices that were not on the table, to the
Mm.
table, from the global south to women, indigenous communities, neurodivergent people, LGBTQ plus people, and of course, children. So you start with the group and what it needs, and from there, you rethink. This tool, and in the case of children, is the same. Perhaps we should start thinking more about intelligence in terms of play, like a kind of toys, and
Mhm.
less in terms of mere provider of information, which is what is today the hegemonic mental model.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's definitely a very different approach from the start to how we
Mm.
think about it. I think it was an interesting point that you made about the fact that toys that include AI or this type of technology can go obsolete or like also dependent on the initial company in terms of
Mm.
updating the toy
Mm.
constantly. That we know how children can get like very attached to their toys over long periods of time, and it can be very damaging if a toy gets obsolete or the model is not working anymore. The company
Yeah,
goes bankrupt, which was not the case with physical toys.
exactly. And at the same time, it's amazing because you find amazing stories. I remember one of from an engineer, a woman that with her son, they have an incredible experience with one of these AI toys, and they reshape the toy together completely by open the toy and recoding with a Arduino plate and a laptop the whole system of the toy, and
Mm,
instead of make it uh, capable to say "I love you," that is very dangerous because you are um, giving a false human impression to a child and tricking the relationship and giving them the false impression that the toy feels and is able to create true relationships. They turn this, they shift this to another funny thing that is when you w- touch one of the ears, the face change of color and things like that. So something much more robotic, let's say, but much more honest. And that was the interesting thing. They moved from something that was strictly based on time consuming and benefit,
Hmm.
money benefit, to something that is values and ethical guardrails. So it's
Mm.
perfectly possible with in a very simple experience. They didn't need $1 million or a lot of time. They did it in a weekend.
Wow. Yeah, that's very inspiring.
Mm.
And in that spirit, like what would need to change? So how do you see? So we talked about what the issue is with those current models. Like how could they change? What needs to change to get to a true child-centered AI that would be relevant and helpful, like for families and also in education?
I think is the first thing is there to imagine a whole new model and neutralize all this narrative that we are immersed, that is one only single way to imagine language learn models and to create language learn models because it's something absolutely obtruse and opaque and difficult and only for experts. For me, this is the first step, and this personally, this is what I live in my recent projects with researchers and with researchers from universities and entrepreneurs and startup people. There are emerging more and more initiatives where language learn models are there to just transform them, to even um, recreate completely them, to think about them in a completely different way, in a completely different direction. So it's interesting if you compare, for example, the foundational perspective of the current language learn models that are designed from the adult mindset. Why not to start to think about language learn model design from the scratch, from the beginning by children, by asking them about this and observe and listen what they say to you, what they think about, or try to include other orientations over the economic benefit driven, for example, question of well-being, mental health, as a driver of the language learn model. To have clear, strong guardrails embedded by design from the scratch, not post design.
Mm.
That is the usual trend. Things like transparency, try to be very aware about the resources consumption. For example, water. For example, rare metals or rare earths, or the social dimension. Who is attending the training of all this data in what countries, doing what, in what conditions, or the user role. I mean, from it's a little bit like this question of the museums that we were talking about, from the passive consumer to the active co-creator citizen, from encourage maximum and continuous use to something that you can easily leave and decide if you want or not to use. The joke that I did at the beginning of our conversation, that I find more interesting the tools that I uh, I don't need it. So this is something remarkable, and the question of the 27 connection online that some teenagers, for example, they find so important because it's like a kind of parallel world. The program is for me 24/7, something that I don't have with my friends or my families. Well, this is also something very important to have a discrete uh, occupation of time
Mm,
and capabilities
mm,
from commercial property to open source. Why we don't create much more language learn models in open source?
mhm.
Uh, Remember at the beginning of the internet and the coding was a very important movement of open source and Linux and all this movement. Why we are not living something similar in artificial intelligence nowadays? Something curious, or how to move from this centralized model to something
Mhm,
much more distributed, more local,
mhm.
uh, where the analog is much more present. Not everything is digital or data driven, where there are much more room for prosociality and communality and intergenerational connections, and of course where the final milestone is human communication, not machine to machine communication.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm curious because technology moves so fast right now. Like it feels so important as a topic. And from your point of view, if you don't really put effort in that, if we don't rethink AI for children right now, like what risks do you see in the near future?
Well, I see several of them. The first one uh, w- is the one that concerns me the most is the standardization of thinking and especially language. Um, some interesting research is showing that due to for example, the influence of language learn models, we are using less and less diverse vocabulary and semantics. Is affecting the way we use language because we start to have language learn models as sources of language learning,
Hmm.
our dictionaries, our rooms, our classrooms to learn and to get words to build sentences. And it's becoming more and more standardized because we are starting to feed only on this language, prefabricated language, preconceived language, predetermined language. We have less and less space for freedom and for improvisation and for difference and diversity and out of the box use of the language. So here also incidentally local communities that are starting to use artificial intelligence in different ways, especially in Africa, for example, their own linguistic specificity, or in Asia, South Asia, has an advantage comparing with Western communities because they are trying to use these language learn models by considering their language specificity and and this is, I think, interesting. The second risk is I also concerned is about what I mentioned before. Big techs are turning children into packages of marketable data without the slightest restriction, and how they are increasingly encroaching on their privacy and emotional dependencies to make them addicted to the technology, a very toxic way. So I know that the children at the same time are incredibly capable to identify this risk and to develop strategies to counterattack, let's say, and make them more safe. And this is happening. I mean, they are not waiting for the adults to be safe. They are creating their own codes, their own platforms, their own rituals, their own measures, their own tools to achieve this safety. And we adults, we don't know this how they are doing.
Mm.
I'm concerned about this type of toxic relationships, which reduce their capacity for choice and freedom to zero, or let's think about them in a very um, naive way, simple way. And finally, I'm concerned for these systems create a parallel reality in which there is no frustration, no effort, no sorrow, no pain, no ambiguity, no gray areas,
Mm.
no indeterminacy. So all of this is creating a kind of a strong bubble pull effect on children who choose. Some of them they decide to stay in this bubble because when they go out to the real world, they find that the experience is unbearable sometimes. Is so difficult for them to process and to digest because they are not trained to be frustrated, to be resilient, to be to face the difficulty, and there will have a serious problem. Reality is complex, as you know, and difficult, and we do not always get what we want, and failure and doubt and chaos and bad luck exist, of course, exist. What is more, they are inherent and essential part of any true learning process. So this has a lot of consequences in learning and schools and education because it's moving from the equation and a very essential part that is the frustration and the difficulties.
Mm. Yeah, and I can see that. Yeah, all throughout like our education now, and even for adults, right? The more
Mm.
we rely on AI to help us create,
Mhm,
uh, the more like we give up our cognitive power,
mhm.
and it's like a muscle that you need to keep training. And if you don't train it, then in some situation you're gonna be having some challenges and troubles.
Exactly, and it's not possible to substitute this mental exercise, muscle exercise,
Mhm.
with any technology, not
Yeah.
only artificial intelligence. And I think we are giving all this power, let's say, to
Mhm.
the technology, and children are on the back of this giving up.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's especially damaging for them since they are in those phases of uh, brain development where they really need to build these connections, and those windows are only for a limited time and then they close.
I'm, for example, very aware about because for me the period from 0 to 6, what I mentioned, is the most important period on the human life.
Mhm.
Is the fundamentals of absolutely everything, and that's the next holy grail of the artificial intelligence.
Mm.
Try to reach out all this period of time and transform into an artificial intelligence world.
Mm.
And this is so scary because it implies move to a very serious field, that is the behavior, psychological, affection, emotional, basic development in terms of neuroscience of human being.
Mhm.
But all this technology that is related with brain and implants on brain is oriented towards this holy grail.
Yeah, and that's definitely some concerning
Hmm.
visions. And I want to counterbalance that with something more optimistic
Okay,
and
that's great.
positive.
That's great.
And just wondering, like, if we fast forward 10 years, for you? Like, what would, if you go in the right direction, what would a truly child-centered like AI ecosystem look like that really support children's development?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm also even could sound a little bit pessimistic, but I am also very optimistic because I'm seeing a lot of incredible initiatives all over the world, literally reshaping the path of this hegemonic perspective mental models. I love the analogy of the playground. I changed the Latin for the Greek middle letter, so AI playground in the middle, AI for AI with Latin, uh, and and I see as a place where the important things is to have fun, to learn, to truly interact with others, to reconnect, to connect truly with others, and the presence of artificial intelligence is subordinate to that, is put on the place to improve all this, but only if is able to improve all these previous. If not, is easily discardable and easily stoppable and like a kind of unuseful thing in a room. So no, artificial intelligence does not meet this requirement will exist. In addition, physical presence will be essential also. I think the embodiment is the big thing for the next years. Regain our embodiment and our corporal power, and assume this importance in everything. So children will be able to, for example, tell stories or create toys or set up exhibitions to have at home or design games or create museums or worlds, as much more with artificial intelligence created by children for everyone. So I see, and I am seeing this in my projects, a kind of you remember Scratch, so a kind of version of a Scratch, but with artificial intelligence, where this model of prosociality, communality, well-being, commonwealth, um, joy, playful spirit is everything, and that's the main milestone to achieve.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jose, for this conversation. I think it's so important to take a step back in that world that goes so fast, so we can like reassess, the way we look at things and we approach things. And so important to look at it from a child-centered perspective. So really appreciate that. I have one last question that I ask everybody on the podcast. If you could design a school around one thing, what would it be and why?
Well, I think you know the answer. The answer is children.
Yeah.
Children, of course, they are the ones who can co-create a memorable school,
Mm.
and they are the ones who can do this place for never leave, to never leave,
Mm.
that I mentioned previously. And they are the ones who are doing this. In fact, they are doing this in different countries. In that I know they are starting to lead the path to co-create much more children aligned schools, and that also involve artificial intelligence, of course.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So, Jose, where can people find more information about you and your work?
Well, easily, I'm on LinkedIn, very active. In my profile, you can find me easily, and you have here all my email address and my contacts, my company website, Culture Inquiry. Also have a LinkedIn profile and a website. I also recommend a couple of books that I have written recently. You mentioned one of them, Children's Sport in Museums, published last summer in Routledge. But also another That is quite interesting and summarize quite well the tone of this conversation. That is why it's so great to be a child as an adult. Self-advocacy manual for educators. It's published in United Press. You can find on the website and enjoy with readings because it's quite funny all the stories that I have found during all these years, inspired by children and thinking out of the box about everything, about nature, about what is to learn, about what is the role of the teacher, what is the importance of play and about everything. It's a whole world. And I try to recreate some of the main characteristics of the world in my books.
Love it. So
Thank
I'll
you.
put all the links in the description of the episode. So please go have a look. Definitely sounds like something I want to read like right now.
Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Martin.
Thank
So
you,
happy.
Jose.